Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. Have President Obama's AFCAP plans cast a shadow over Indo-US relations and perhaps introduced an element of tension between India and Pakistan? That's the key issue I shall explore today with the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Shashi Tharor. Minister, let's start with President Obama's AFCAP strategy just announced last week. He's promised to disrupt, dismantle and defeat Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but he hasn't said a single word about the terrorist organizations that tackle India like LET and Jaish. Are you disappointed?
Not at all, because basically the problems that affect India directly are our business, not somebody else's. President Obama has a direct stake in what's going on in Afghanistan and Pakistan. He has troops on the ground in Afghanistan, as well as indeed military actions and logistics support through Pakistan. AFPAC is Afghanistan and Pakistan. It doesn't involve India, and so while we are close observers, we have no reason whatsoever to be concerned about our emissions.
Let me pursue the point like this. President Obama went on to say, and I'm quoting him, "We cannot tolerate a safe haven for terrorists whose location is known and whose intentions are clear." That applies word for word for the presence of LET and Jaish in Pakistan, and yet they're not part of his reckoning.
Well, look, this was a speech about a very specific subject. Here is a president addressing his own people about a commitment made by his government to send his country's nationals as troops to a foreign land. That's what that's all about.
But
why do we look at this so completely from an Indian perspective?
Because it's a commitment to eradicate terrorism, and yet it appears that the only terrorism he's interested in is the one that's inflicted upon his soldiers and his country, not the terrorism that India suffers. After all, he's spoken in his speech about the bombing of London, Amman and Bali, but he consciously and deliberately left out 2611. Doesn't it suggest that he views 2611 in a different light?
No, look, on that particular point, I think the distinction that the Americans have made is between what they would call Al-Qaeda inspired attacks and the more India-specific attack of 2611. Now, we don't accept that distinction. For us, there is no significant difference between somebody who wants to kill people in Bali and who wants to kill people in Mumbai.
Absolutely.
But the point is, we're not the US. We don't have to agree with everything they say or do the way they do it. But in this particular speech, Karan, it had nothing to do with us.
Except
the only thing is that when pressure is eased on Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan and Pakistan, it adds to the pressure on us. And therefore, it is a good thing for us that that aspect of the problem is dealt with and those people are kept on the back.
I let you answer that fully without interrupting you, but I'm going to bring you back to the point that I made. He's undertaken and promised that they will not tolerate a safe haven for terrorists. That is exactly what Pakistan is when it comes to the LET and Jaish. He says that terrorists whose intentions are clear will be removed. That again applies to LET and Jaish, and yet LET and Jaish don't feature. They are paramount to
Karan,
us.
you're making me repeat myself. This is not a speech about LET and Jaish, it's a speech about Afghanistan and Pakistan. Our cooperation with the United
Pakistan
States.
and LET and Jaish are centered in Pakistan.
No,
They're
but
probably supported by Pakistan.
The Afghan-Pak border is what they're talking about. Our chaps, the people who are bothering us are not on the Afghan-Pak border necessarily. Some of them are, some of them are not. But can I finish my point? It's quite simply this. We do have strong cooperation with the US, which is of a very different nature because the US doesn't have any troops or security forces engaged in the operation against our immediate enemies. But we do have cooperation, we have exchange of information. When the Prime Minister was in Washington, he initialed, or rather his staff initialed, a counter-terrorism initiative.
Let me come back to the fight against terror. President Obama in that speech repeatedly called Pakistan a partner. He talked about a partnership with Pakistan. And yet in Indian eyes, Pakistan is either a state sponsor of terror or at least a sympathizer of terror. Can you have a meaningful partnership fighting terror with a country that uses terror as an instrument of state policy?
Now, you and I may have a different view on this from the US. But you know, in my old UN peacekeeping days, I was taught by an American, a very grizzled American general, the adage that amateurs discuss strategy, rank amateurs discuss tactics, true professionals focus on logistics. And there is no effective action against terrorists on the Afghan-Pakistan border without being conscious of the logistics of Pakistan, of using Pakistani territory to supply American forces, of NATO going through through Pakistani soil. Logistics are an extremely important consideration there that apply in a very different way from the
Minister,
kind of...
you're blinding me with glib speech. Logistics only come into play once you've actually got the target and the principles correct. What I'm pointing out to
No,
you
the target is very
that
clear.
the
We share that.
American president's view of Pakistan is blinkered. He's only looking at the terror that is sourced from Pakistan that affects him. The terror from Pakistan that affects us is consciously, deliberately ignored.
That's not accurate. The US is looking at the terror that affects us. They're looking at it off camera. They're not looking at it in a speech by the US president to his people about his troops. There are no American troops involved in our fight. This is our problem, Karan. Let's deal with it ourselves.
You say they're looking at it off camera. Let me then come to a critical question. How confident are you that because AFPAC depends critically on support from Pakistan, that President Obama won't become sympathetic to the Pakistani view that the terror that India faces out of Pakistani soil is linked to Kashmir? We refute it. Pakistan insists on that connection. And how confident are you that Obama won't, under pressure from Pakistan, begin to take that view?
Because we have been dealing with the US administration now, the new US administration, for 11 months. We've had extremely good dialogues at various levels, from the Prime Minister on down. And every indication is that that is not the way the US thinks about our problems.
Is every indication of that?
Absolutely.
In the letter that President Obama sent Zardari, which was widely reported by the Washington Post and the New York Times, he's once again gone back to talking about efforts to reduce tensions between India and Pakistan. That's exactly what Pakistan is pressing for. It's precisely what you don't want. This is a clear sign that he's veering to their side of the argument.
It's what we do want. We want to reduce tensions with Pakistan.
But not with American help.
No, not with American help.
But he's offering American help.
Well, I'm sorry. There are many statements from US officials saying that they fully understand this is a problem to be solved between India and Pakistan.
So that means that the American president says different things to Indians and different things to Pakistanis. That's even worse. You can't even rely on him then.
No, we are not relying on anybody else to solve our problems, Karan. Let's get this straight from the very beginning. India stands on its own 2 feet. We will deal with our own problems. But having said that, we see the US as a positive and supportive element on this. And as far as the AFPAC policy is concerned, we applaud every effort to maintain pressure and roll back the advances made by militants and terrorists in that region.
So you're truly saying to me that you're not disappointed by the fact that he wants to wipe out Pakistan as a haven for terrorists, but he doesn't talk about LET and Jesh. You're truly saying to me that you don't worry that his only concentration is on the terror that he faces, and he's consciously ignoring the terror that we face.
But that's what his speech was about, Karan.
Ignoring India.
No, but his speech was about the problems that the US and NATO faces, and it's a speech to his voters and his citizens.
All right.
If he met with us and ignored our concerns, that would be different. He has not done so. He has met with us and shown a lot of respect for our concerns.
That's how you put it. Many others would disagree. Let's then, for a moment, for argument's sake, take on board the argument you're making. You say that he's met with us and taken our concerns on board. Let me put to you a different sort of problem, but equally pressing. As pressure on Taliban and Al-Qaeda grows on the western border of Pakistan, how confident are you that they won't start targeting India with terror attacks to deflect attention? That's precisely what Robert Gates told the Senate that he was worried about 2 days ago. Are you scared? Do you share that fear?
We're not scared, but we're conscious we need to be vigilant. And it's not just Indian interest in India. As you know, we've been attacked twice in our embassy in Kabul. We don't take these things lightly. There is no question that it's the same elements, the same sorts of elements behind what happened in Mumbai and behind what happened in Kabul.
But don't you see what I'm saying? That AFPAC, therefore, far from making India more secure, will actually make India in the short term more vulnerable, because as pressure on Taliban and Al-Qaeda build, they will deflect attention on us, and we're uncovered. Suddenly, his lack of concern for India is going to make us vulnerable.
No, I don't agree with that at all. First of all, we need these phenomena to be dealt with. Whether they're dealt with jointly or separately by different people, they have to be dealt with. Now, to say that we become more vulnerable is silly, because the very fact is that here you've got people, including some of the same command elements, the same financial elements, the same arms suppliers, behind the groups of militants and killers who have done their damage in our country, who have wreaked havoc in Mumbai and elsewhere. Some of the same people are also under pressure, as you correctly said, on the Afghan-Pakistan border, number one. Number two, as far as we are concerned here, our obligation to be vigilant is a national security obligation.
Absolutely. But
and we are vigilant anyway. We're not complacent. We're not assuming we are safe. We
No.
can take some comfort in the fact there's been no significant attack for a year, but that doesn't mean that it'll last for another year.
But
We
the
just have to
need
do what
for
we need to do.
vigilance has just gone up markedly, and it's not me alone saying it. Robert Gates, President Obama's defense secretary, in his hearings in the Senate said it. He pointedly said that Al-Qaeda, with elements like the LET, will now perhaps seek to target India as a way of deflecting attention. And because LET is not covered by Obama, we're not only made more vulnerable, but at the same time we're left uncovered. That's the problem. We're hit both ways.
First of all, you don't need to listen to Robert Gates. You can listen to P. Chidambaram, our Home Minister.
But
who
Robert
said
Gates is
much
his
of the same
defense
things.
secretary, and Obama is ignoring in the speech the fear that Robert Gates has, and you don't seem to take it seriously either.
I take it very seriously. I just don't take it seriously from watching President Obama on television. I take it seriously as a matter of national interest within India. And let me stress one more thing. We are not, quote unquote, uncovered when it comes to dealing with LET. We have our own efforts, we have our own strategies, and we do have support, intelligence, information, and cooperation from others, including the US. So to say we are not covered is also simply not accurate.
Let's hope you're right. The safety and security of perhaps 1 billion Indians depends upon the certainty with which you speak. Let's take a break and come back and talk about another way in which AFPAC perhaps heightens the vulnerability of India. That's in a moment's time. See you after the break. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate with the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Shashi Tharor. Minister, let's come to another sense in which AFPAC makes India more vulnerable. President Obama has committed his country to stepping up American military supplies and equipment to Pakistan. You know that those supplies are frequently used against India. President Musharraf has admitted it, and as a candidate, Obama acknowledged it. Now, with stepped up supplies to Pakistan, are you worried that once again they're going to be used against India?
Well, we have shared our concerns with the US at various levels, with the administration, with Congress. Our point is very simple. By all means, support Pakistan in this battle, but keep an eye on what you give and how it's used, and show them that it's not just a blank check, which can then be turned around to be used against us.
What response did you get from them?
Very positive. So
Well,
in
when you
fact,
say very
that's why there's conditional language written into the law as well, because congressmen and senators agreed with our concerns, and the administration has said that they are going to be very vigilant about how their assistance is used. Now, having said all of this,
Can I
I want to add one.
Are you saying that the conditional language written into the Kerry-Lugar bill was done at the behest or the insistence of India to give India the security that this won't be used against India?
I would never suggest that any independent lawmaker in a sovereign free country would act at our behest. All I'm saying is that we made people aware of our concerns, and those concerns appear to have been taken into account. Now, having said that, I do want to make another very important point, which is, yes, of the $11 billion that the US gave after 9/11 to Pakistan for military assistance, a recent report in the public press, I'm not talking about anything classified, actually says that only $687 million were actually spent on the weaponry that they were supposed to be used for, and lots of diversions occurred. So I want you to understand that not every figure we see necessarily points into a barrel pointed at India.
Absolutely.
Final point.
You're saying misuse of funds in
happens
Pakistan
is
in
well.
a sense a way that we are saved from equipment being used against us.
And the
Thank
final,
God for that misuse.
Well, to some degree, but the final point, and the most important of all, is that whatever equipment Pakistan has, and whether they get it this way or they get it some other way, whether they buy it from other, off the shelf on the market, whether they get it because of the Afghanistan excuse, the bottom line is the Indian Defence Forces are prepared. We go right back to the 65 war when there was all this worry about the Patton tanks and the Sabre jets,
Minister,
and our chaps held their own. I'm just saying to you, let's not worry too much. Pakistan as an army can buy equipment anywhere. If it comes to conflict, we are prepared.
When it comes to the Indian Defence Forces, clearly generals can't speak in public, but retired army chiefs have expressed their concern. I'm talking of General Malik, the victor of Kargil, who told this very program that he's concerned by the way in which Pakistan has developed and made the Harpoon missile nuclear capable. He's concerned about reports that in fact Pakistan's nuclear arsenal may now be larger than ours. He's particularly concerned, even though it may be only 600 million worth, of the way in which Pakistani equipment is frequently used against us, even though it's not so intended by the Americans who give it. So those concerns are there, you know it, I know it. It's just that generals can't express it in public. Let me move to something that concerns everyone. And clearly it concerns President Obama, the state of Pakistan's nuclear weapons. In his speech, he seems to have suggested that he's worried they could fall into terrorist hands. So let me, as Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, ask you bluntly, how safe do you believe are Pakistan's nuclear weapons?
Well, we don't have first-hand information on that, Karan, but certainly those who do and those who are very close to Pakistan seem to be convinced, at least in terms of various private soundings, that there is nothing to worry about in that area. Now, obviously, we will never be complacent about these things, but Pakistan, for all its limitations, does have a strong military establishment. And as of now, in any case, they appear to be in control of their own weapons.
Pakistan says that their weapons are secure, that they're in complete control. Do you take that at face value?
At this stage, yes. We have no reason to doubt that yet.
Was this subject discussed between the Indian Prime Minister and the American President when he visited Washington recently?
I have no reason to believe so. It certainly wasn't part of the debriefing that I received, so I don't know.
Does India have its own contingency plan of action in case Pakistan's nuclear weapons seem to be in danger of falling into wrong hands?
Look, we are not there yet, Karan, and I'm a little anxious not to get into unnecessary alarmism at this point. Pakistan has a lot of difficulties, but they're not about to fall apart yet as a state, and they're not about to have their army surrendering control of its most prized military asset to irregulars. So at this stage, this is not a concern, but obviously this is a further argument for why, as the Prime Minister has repeatedly said, a stable, peaceful Pakistan is in our interest too.
Are you sounding sanguine, or are you in danger of sounding a little complacent?
No, we're not complacent at all, Karan. But what good does it do to worry the Indian public about a threat that at this point is purely theoretical?
Let me then come back to the key issue that this interview was about. And I'm going to quote this time to you a former American ambassador, Robert Blackwell, who, speaking to the CIA in Delhi, said that America has an enveloping preoccupation with Pakistan, and he added that India is seen largely through the lens of deeply disturbing developments in Pakistan. The entire emphasis of Obama's AFPAC strategy, the sense in which India and the threat India faces from Pakistan has been ignored, proves that Blackwell is right.
Look, I have a lot of respect for Ambassador Blackwell, but I do not believe India is being ignored. As far as I'm concerned, we have to really stop being as self-obsessed as we sometimes seem to be in our media about every slight, real or imagined, by foreign leaders. The President's speech was addressed to the American people. It was about a very specific and narrow preoccupation. It was not about us. When he spoke about us, when our Prime Minister was there, everything he said, we were very happy to hear. The body language in those meetings, the joint statement, the press conference, there's absolutely nothing from our point of view.
The point people ask is, why can't the things that he says when the Prime Minister's there be said also in speeches which are, after all, to do with terrorism in South Asia and to do with Pakistan as a haven for terrorists, because that is a country that's a haven for our terrorists as well. Why does he ignore one and not the other?
Well, you'll have to ask him that, or his speechwriters.
Isn't that
but
disturbing,
my point is, I don't think it's a reasonable question. Why were you criticizing him for refusing to mix apples with oranges?
For the simple reason that, in fact, they're both oranges. They're not.
No, they're both fruit.
They're both oranges.
They're not the same
both
fruit.
Both of those are terrorists. He's just looking
There
at
are no
American
American troops, no NATO troops involved in India's fight against terrorism. Let me put that very clearly. And therefore, it was not a concern. They're both fruit, but they're different fruit. And as far as we're concerned, he didn't mix them, and that's fine.
Let me then end by asking you, how confident are you that as America's dependence on Islamabad grows, and it's going to grow increasingly over the next 2 years as AFPAC works itself out, that this won't affect India's relationship with Washington?
Look, part of our job as a government, as a skilled and experienced diplomats, is going to have to be to maintain that relationship in a way that ensures that we're always keeping the dialogue going and ensuring that this effect that you talk about
now
doesn't happen.
you'll be doing that against the odds, against the grain rather than with the grain, because the grain's going against you.
Well, first of all, I don't accept that it is, but if it is, we enjoy rising to challenges.
All right, that's a challenge that you've taken on. I wish you good luck.
Thank you very much.